Since 2014, Kingdom Hearts director Tetsuya Nomura has been making a strange and somewhat startling claim, namely that he has more in common with the series' big bad Xehanort than he does with his game's primary protagonist, Sora. It's easy to see a claim like that and wonder whether Nomura has caught a serious case of the edgelords. But having recently experienced Kingdom Hearts Unchained Key Dark Road, I came to the realization that Nomura's sympathy for his fictional devils may be less proof that he's still fuming over the loss of Versus 13, or even evidence that he's an overgrown emo kid, than an intriguing personal confession about his current state of mind, and which may even shed some light on an important temperamental pitfall of the creative mindset in general. By the way, now is the time to bow out and save this video for later viewing if you haven't played or viewed Dark Road, because major spoilers abound from here on out. With that said, one interesting thing that Dark Road does to develop Xehanort is to provide him with a villainous foil who's traveling the same Dark Road as he is, albeit farther and faster, and a whole lot more effectively, because wow, is that ending a catastrophe. Alder is not a conventional villain, to put it mildly. At first, he comes across as a quiet, sensitive type, a scared, traumatized kid who's so reliant on his sister Hoder's protection that he doesn't know how to handle her loss. But as more of his story is revealed, it quickly becomes apparent that his situation is so much worse than that he found the prospective loss of his sister so traumatic that he concluded that the best path forward was to slaughter her and both of their classmates in a bid to drown the world in darkness. Oddly enough, this wild incongruity between temperament and action seems to be kind of the point. Balder sums up what makes him tick best when he tells Hoder, "Ever since I was little, I could sense what was in people's hearts. The more darkness I felt, the deeper my heart sank into the abyss. It started to consume me, until one day I realized the darkness I thought was theirs was in truth mine. I resigned myself to it because I thought that's just how it was. And then I met others like you, hearts filled with nothing but light. I understood then that there were two kinds of people like you and Ericus, and people like me. Two types of people like Hoder and Ericus and Sora, and people like Balder and Xehanort, and presumably like Nomura himself. What's going on here? Why in the world would Nomura create a villain who's basically the Kingdom Hearts equivalent of a school shooter, and strongly imply he falls into the same category? The key, I think, can be found in the game's sudden Nietzschean turn. In the words of Master of Masters, the weak who fear the strong desire to strip them of their power. Balder and Xehanort are sensitive and empathetic and therefore vulnerable. Their shared gift for reading the hearts of others becomes a curse as they start to fear and despise others for the darkness they see in them, and they're dragged down into the abyss of despair by the growing sense that they're too powerless to change things for the better. Balder's last words are telling. He beseeches Xehanort to seek answers to the unjust ways of the world, to fix a world he's come to see as unfixable, by any means necessary. The ultimate lesson of Dark Road seems to be that recognizing the darkness in others can lead to an obsession with that darkness. And once that obsession goes too far, it's all too easy to see the world as an unjust place in desperate need of a purge. In the game, Balder gets there first through his inherent psychic vulnerability. Vidar nearly follows him in short order upon realizing that the only way to stop the darkness short of remaking the world means executing his dead friend's mad younger brother, and while Xehanort isn't quite there by the end of the game, he apparently gets there within a year through sheer cynicism based on certain flash-forwards. In each case, of course, this dark desire is expressed through a desperate attempt to summon Kingdom Hearts, immediately putting into play all the symbolic weight borne by the series' core foundational myth. Kingdom Hearts has always been both the forbidden fruit and the franchise's analog to the fall of man, and a rough equivalent of the Tower of Babel, a doomed attempt to seize the transcendent that resulted in the scattering of humanity. Ultimately, summoning Kingdom Hearts serves as the series' all-purpose stand-in for any Promethean attempt to violently overthrow a despised order on the off chance that something better might rise from the ashes. This does, however, raise some interesting considerations in light of Nomura's inclination to identify with Xehanort. That Nomura's sensitivity towards the darkness in the heart of mankind has led to a growing obsession with the unfairness of the world seems quite apparent when considering how long he's been insisting that he wants to create games that examine the humanity of his characters and his setting based in the world today with all of this world's ugly issues. Perhaps it is no mere coincidence that Nomura identifies with a character like Xehanort. Even more disconcertingly, perhaps this identification suggests something about creative types in general. After all, who is more adept at recognizing and internalizing the darkness in the heart of man than the author who probes the deepest recesses of his characters' souls, or the actor who throws herself so completely into the embodiment of some other flawed human being that it's hard to tell where one ends and the other begins, or the artist who lays the contents of his own imperfect soul bare on canvas or page? If Dark Road's insight into the nature of darkness is correct, we would expect to find our own world's creatives suffering from an unfortunate tendency towards self-destruction and being drawn inexorably towards the false promise of revolutionary utopia, the hope that the violent destruction of the current unjust order will pave the road to a new Eden of our own making, instead of just ending in pointless bloodshed. Is that an accurate description of the creative mindset? I'll let you decide, but it's worth considering whether it's a coincidence that both substance abuse and faith in technocratic solutions are practically ubiquitous among our culture's top entertainers, and whether it could be more than a mere quirk of history that Hitler was a failed painter and some of Marx's earliest writings were shockingly bleak works of fiction. Now, before we find ourselves trapped in a dark abyss of our own making, let's wrap this up by considering Dark Road's counterbalance to its villain's dark utopianism. The student's prime directive is to avoid upsetting the world's respective orders, even if the order of any particular world appears to be rooted in darkness. It's the justification for this that stands out, however, because it's not a matter of pure moral relativism. Rather, it's based in a posture of epistemic humility. How does a world-hopping teenager with approximately 5 minutes of experience in a particular world really know whether a seemingly dark aspect of that world's order ought to be changed by force? And how is it remotely reasonable to allow oneself to instinctively assume the worst of those we disagree with, when we may very well lack the knowledge and experience required to make such a determination? Perhaps this seems like a rather tenuous defense when faced with the full force of cruelty that a fallen universe brings to bear, but it may be the best option we have. For those of us cursed with a recognition of and desire to do something about this world's darkness, there are few more effective ways to hold utopian visions at bay than the constant reminder that we don't know anywhere near enough to be sure that our supposed utopia won't be infinitely worse than the seemingly unfair order we seek to replace by it. It's also a lot easier to give those who believe terrible things the benefit of the doubt when we remind ourselves that, while we can't really know what's in their head, they probably think they're doing the right thing. That doesn't always mean, of course, that we won't end up stuck in a no-win situation where some unfortunate soul seeking a perceived good becomes so great a threat that his continued existence would lead to unconscionable harm. Xehanort's execution of Balder may be shocking, not least because neither of them is old enough to drive, but it's hard to see any better option. And even under such extreme circumstances, remaining humble about our ability to judge others and the world as a whole is still an awful lot better than allowing the desire to annihilate all we find loathsome in the world to fester within us. Because ultimately, darkness of that particular sort is never satisfied by the destruction of that which deserves to be destroyed. If it isn't recognized for what it is and diffused, it will ultimately seek to drown everything in its path. And when that happens, nobody wins. So where does all of this leave Nomura? In the best possible position someone like him could be in, actually, because the temperamental tendency towards darkness that makes creatives so dangerous also grants them insight into where people go wrong, and the ability to pass that insight on to others. And when they channel their desire for change in that direction, rather than into doomed attempts to remake the world, the result can be something really special.